20 years. That's the number no one told you, but the universe was counting down. You probably didn't stop to think about it that way. It wasn't waking up one morning and realizing there was a countdown happening without you knowing. You simply lived. You endured, you held on, you carried on. And from the outside, it seemed that Taurus was just that sign that endures, that doesn't complain, that is always firm while everything around it shakes. But something much bigger was brewing beneath all of this. On June 25th and 26th, 2026, a 20-year karmic debt begins to be paid. Not as a metaphor, not as a vague promise, as a real result of everything that has been accumulated, suffered, carried, and transformed throughout a cycle that is coming to its natural end. And here's what will change, how you understand all of this from now on. What Taurus always interpreted as slowness, as waiting, as that feeling of why doesn't anything change at the right pace for me, was, in fact, the universe building the exact level of firmness needed to support what comes next. You weren't being left behind, you were being prepared. Stay until the end of this video, because what's coming for Taurus now isn't a fleeting relief. It's the closure of something that began before you had enough clarity to recognize it. And when you understand the complete mechanism, something within you will fall into place in a way that's irreversible. But there's something no one has told you about this waiting. There's a logic underlying it that astrology can see with almost disturbing clarity. A logic that says, not all patience is resignation. Some patience is accumulation. And what accumulates will one day be demanded of. Imagine a tree that grew on a rock. It didn't choose that ground, but it grew anyway, through it, slowly, with roots finding every possible crevice. And when you look at that tree after 20 years, you don't see fragility. You see a structure that no easy soil could have produced. This is how karma works for Taurus. This is how cycles work. And this is why June 25th and 26th, 2026 are not an ordinary date on the calendar. They are the moment when a very old account will finally be settled. But before you understand what's coming, you need to understand what has accumulated, because the universe doesn't pay debts randomly. It pays with precision. And the precision with which this will happen for Taurus now is the same precision with which everything has been recorded. Every silence, every choice not to take revenge, every time you held back when you had every right to let go. There is a cycle of approximately 20 years that astrology calls the lunar node cycle. It is a cycle that marks the major learning themes of a life, what the soul came to work on, what still needs to be resolved, what was accumulated in previous lives or simply in the hardest chapters of this one. For Taurus, this cycle that is now ending was especially heavy. It wasn't a phase of learning to be more patient. Taurus already had patience. It was a phase of learning to bear the weight of consequences that weren't yours, betrayals from people you loved who acted as if your love was guaranteed, sacrifices you made in silence that were never acknowledged, promises that were broken and left you there, standing firm, holding on to what was left. And you continued. Not because it didn't hurt, but because Taurus has something rare, the ability to stay even when everything tells you to leave. It's a gift and also a burden. For a long time, it was impossible to know if this ability was saving you or holding you back. Here's what nobody told you. You weren't being imprisoned. You were being used as an instrument in a much larger arrangement, an arrangement the universe was silently orchestrating while you simply lived, survived, resisted. And now what? You were carrying a weight that wasn't yours. You felt it, perhaps. You had the sensation that there was something bigger beneath everything that happened in those years. But naming is different from feeling, and now that it has a name, the question remains, what does Taurus do with it? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. Not as a prediction manual, but as a tool to understand the inner architecture of Taurus, why you carry what you carry, why you expect as you expect, and what it means to be truly ready to receive now that this cycle is turning. Because Taurus knows how to build security in the material world, but sometimes loses the thread of that inner security, which no betrayal can touch. You are still processing this now, with the discomfort still present and that feeling of recognition tightening in your chest. This is the right moment, not after the emotion subsides. Now, while something inside you is still open. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, what was the biggest burden you carried in recent years that only now is starting to make sense? Write it below. This is an exercise for you, not for me, an instrument for greater success. Let that idea linger for a moment, because there's a fundamental difference between being a victim of something and being part of a process you couldn't yet fully see. Taurus, by nature, tends to take responsibility for what it feels, even for what it didn't cause. And during this long cycle, this tendency was put to the test in an almost brutal way. You felt the weight of other people's choices, as if they were your own. You carried the consequences of stories that began before you arrived in them. Stories with characters who have already left the scene, but whose effects remained, settled in your body, in your memory, in your way of expecting before trusting. And now the universe is presenting the bill. Not for you to pay, for you to receive. Imagine a safe. Not the kind of safe you keep money in, the kind that holds what is most precious and therefore needs protection. For many years, Taurus functioned as that safe. It guarded things that weren't its own, supported structures that depended on its firmness, kept safe everything that those around it couldn't hold on to alone. And it did so without complaining. It did so because it's in Taurus's nature to protect what it loves, to take care of what is its responsibility, to not abandon anything halfway. But every safe has a true owner. And when the owner arrives, when the right moment comes, the safe no longer needs to hold what isn't theirs. They can open it. And what was inside, everything that was accumulated with so much dedication, returns to its rightful owner. You were the safe. What is yours has always been protected inside, and June 25th and 26th, 2026 are the days when that safe begins to open. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. Now I need to tell you what's happening in the sky on those dates, and why it matters specifically for Taurus. You've probably noticed that some moments in life have a different quality. Not necessarily because something dramatic happened externally, but because something internal shifted. As if a signal that was static suddenly became clear. As if a frequency you'd been trying to tune into for years finally found the right channel. This is how these dates work for Taurus. It's not that the universe will solve everything in 2 days. It's not that you'll wake up on the 25th and your life will be transformed on the outside. That's not how karma works, and Taurus, of all the signs, knows this better than anyone. Taurus knows that real things take time, that what is true doesn't appear overnight, that solidity isn't immediate. What changes these days is the frequency. It's as if the universe is adjusting the signal, removing the interference that prevented certain things from reaching you, certain doors from opening, certain recognitions from happening. What was blocked begins to flow. What was dammed up begins to find its way. And most importantly, what was waiting for permission begins to move. For some Taurus, this will appear as an unexpected conversation that changes a direction that seemed stuck for years. For others, as an inner insight that suddenly clarifies something that has been hazy for months, a certainty that arrives quietly, without fanfare, but that you know is real because it doesn't waver. For still others, as a concrete event, a change of position, a resource that becomes available, a recognition that arrived late but arrived whole, a relationship that finally resolves itself in one direction or another, once and for all. Whatever form it takes, it will have one unmistakable characteristic for Taurus. It will seem inevitable. It won't seem like luck. It will seem like it was always meant to be this way. What all these forms have in common is that they don't come from nothing. They come from everything that was sown before. They come from accumulation. They come from what Taurus built, sometimes without realizing it was building, during this long cycle that is coming to an end. And here's where the paradox sets in an almost unsettling way. Everything Taurus interpreted as slowness in those years, the decisions that took longer than expected, the movements that seemed too small to make a difference, the choices not to act when emotion demanded action were in fact discernment, depth, the difference between a shallow root that gives way in the first storm and a deep root that holds everything together. Think of wine, not just any wine, the kind that needs the exact right amount of time to mature. You can open the bottle before it's ready. Nothing will stop you. But what you'll find isn't what was promised. What was promised only exists after the necessary time, and that time isn't empty waiting. It's active transformation happening within a protected environment. Taurus was the bottle. The internal process of all these years was transformation, and now the time has come. What Taurus is ready to receive today has nothing to do with what it would have received 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Not because the universe was holding it back, but because the recipient needed to be the right one. The capacity to sustain, to not waste, to honor what comes, it was built throughout this entire process. Taurus needed to go through it, not as punishment, as preparation. But there is one last resistance that Taurus faces at this moment, and one that few can clearly name. It is the resistance of someone who has spent so much time in receiving mode that the receiving mode feels strange, almost uncomfortable, as if it weren't real, as if there were some mistake, as if deep down it weren't deserved. Taurus, who spends years giving, holding on, waiting, may freeze when it comes time to receive, not for lack of desire, for lack of practice. And this is precisely where internal preparation makes all the difference. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. And there's something that happened in this process that almost no one talks about. Something that Taurus rarely admits, even to themselves. There are desires that Taurus has never voiced, not out of shame, not out of fear, but because Taurus has a very particular relationship with what it wants. It doesn't ask easily. It doesn't display what it feels before feeling the ground is secure. It doesn't expose what it needs before being sure the other person will honor it. It doesn't open its hand to show what it carries. There's a silent pride there, a dignity that doesn't want to be confused with need, a strength that fears that asking is the same as admitting weakness. So Taurus wanted it, but didn't say it. He needed it, but didn't show it. He prayed, sometimes literally, sometimes only with his heart, but he prayed inwardly, without an address, without a clear recipient, and the universe heard it anyway. Because the universe doesn't just respond to what is verbalized, it responds to what is deeply felt. And Taurus, of all the signs, feels deeply. It feels profoundly. It feels slowly. It feels in a way that takes time to move, but doesn't disappear. What Taurus truly wants isn't a whim, it's conviction. And the universe recognizes conviction even in silence. Imagine a letter mailed without an address. In theory, that shouldn't be enough, but sometimes it arrives because what guided the letter wasn't the words written on the envelope. It was the intention of the writer, the clarity of the sender, the certainty, however timid, of the person who believed there was a recipient on the other side. You've posted many letters like this over these 20 years, Taurus. Wishes that never became requests, prayers that never became words, needs that never became demands. And they arrived. And the answers are arriving now, some in ways you'll recognize immediately, others in ways that will take a little longer to make sense. But they're arriving. And here's the part most people can't see without taking a step back. The balance was positive for longer than you realize. The universe wasn't calculating against you. It was calculating in your favor. It was silently arranging the exact measure of what you built, what you endured, what you never demanded from anyone but which was, by right, yours. Imagine a scale. Not the decorative scale, not the one on display, the real scale, the one that measures what exists on each side with cold, absolute precision, that is not impressed by speeches, that does not negotiate with explanations, that simply records what has been put in and what is missing. For many years, Taurus placed weight on one side: effort, sacrifice, patience, silence, and perseverance. And the other side became lighter than it should have been. Not because of cosmic injustice, but because the counterweight was still being manufactured. It was still being assembled. It was still arriving from different places to come together at the right time. June 25th and 26th, 2026 are the days when the counterweight arrives. Not all at once, necessarily. The scales don't tip in an instant. They find balance gradually, with an adjustment here, another there, until what was tilted too far to one side begins to level out. And for Taurus, this leveling will have a specific flavor, the flavor of recognition, the feeling that something that was crooked has finally become straight. Not because someone from the outside fixed it, but because the structure you built inside was strong enough to sustain the balance when it arrived. But here's what no one prepares Taurus to face. What if receiving is harder than enduring? Taurus has spent so much time in holding on, in firmness, resistance, and endurance, that the way they receive things can feel strange. It can feel uncomfortably strange, almost as if it's not real, as if there's been some mistake. Why now? Why me? Do I deserve this after everything? The answer doesn't come from outside. The answer comes from within. And that's exactly what distinguishes the Taurus who will take advantage of this cycle from the one who will watch it pass by from the window. The ability to say yes when the universe finally says, "Here is what is yours." Not with euphoria, with dignity, with the calm of someone who already knew deep down that this moment would come. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. You deserve it, not as a consolation prize, as a natural result of a cycle you lived through in its entirety. From beginning to end, with all the dignity that Taurus possesses when truly being Taurus. And that leads to the last thing that needs to be said. Taurus was not forgotten. Taurus was preserved. There is a huge difference between these two things, and the universe knows this difference with a clarity that we sometimes lose when we are in the middle of the process. To be forgotten is to be left behind without purpose, without reason, without return. To be preserved is to be kept in a state of protection while the conditions for what comes next are still being prepared. Imagine a seed buried in the dark, without apparent light, without visible growth, without any outward sign that anything is happening. To an outsider, it looks like death. It looks like absence. It seems like nothing is happening. But within that dark earth, within that apparent silence, within that absence of any visible sign, the seed is doing the most important thing it can do: germinating, building structure where no eye can yet see, developing the root before any leaf, building the foundation before any appearance. This is how Taurus has lived these last 20 years. Not dead, not forgotten, germinating, And now, on June 25th and 26th, 2026, something begins to appear above the earth. Something that has existed for a long time, but which finally has the right conditions to be seen, to be recognized, to grow in the light. The universe heard you, Taurus, not in the words you never spoke, but in the roots you never stopped deepening, in the choices you made when no one was watching, in the firmness you maintained when everything demanded you give in the accounts you never collected, but which the universe recorded with the precision of someone who forgets nothing. The karmic debt of 20 years has been paid, not as dramatic relief, but as a silent and profound recognition, as the feeling that something has finally fallen into place, as the certainty, arriving slowly but surely, that what comes now is real. It is yours. And it was conquered in the only way Taurus understands, with presence, with roots, with the time it needed. Taurus is never late. Taurus isn't behind anyone. Taurus arrives at the right time, the time that was specifically prepared for what he has to offer, for what he has to receive, for what he has to be. And that time is now.